All right, I guess we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here and for taking time out of your evening to sit here with us, with the City of West Palm Beach and our consultants, to provide your feedback on the city's waterfront. I'm Jennifer Ferriel. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development for the city. And Mayor James tasked our department with developing a community engagement plan that was going to solicit feedback from the residents on what they'd like to see on the city's waterfront, right? For a long time, there's been discussions about activating the waterfront, how we can make it more attractive to residents, how do we make it more inclusive to residents outside of the downtown area to also make it attractive for them to want to come and visit this space, and how do we create a space that, as our city grows, that will continue to be attractive for not just the residents, but also the visitors that are coming into our city. So with that, we were able to hire a extensive group of consultants and a team with distinctive areas of expertise. We brought in a community engagement consultant who helped us get the word out and reach out to the residents in various areas of our community. We also hired a consultant who works with placemaking and has worked with various municipalities throughout the country to look at placemaking strategies. And then we also hired a consultant that's going to help us analyze the data, right? How are people coming into our city? How are they utilizing the downtown area? Where are they going before and after they come to the waterfront? And how do we take all of that information and your feedback, which is the most important and critical piece, and put it together to formulate a report that will ultimately have some recommendations for the mayor and the city commissions to implement moving forward. So that is the purpose here. This is the first meeting that we've had, or that we're going to have out of 3 meetings. We also have a survey, as many of you know. But before we get started with our presentation, I'd like to just have the consultant team and the city staff briefly introduce themselves so you know who they are.
Well, I'm Tony Garcia. I'm with Street Plans. We're based out of Miami and Brooklyn. We do public space design, placemaking, and transportation planning.
Hi, I'm Charisma Adams. I am the owner of Articulate Consulting, and I am tasked on here with community engagement, getting the word out through digital, through door-to-door, all of our grassroots organizing methods. Thank you.
I'm Kevin Crowder. I own Business Fair. We're economic and market consultants. We're based out of Stewart and Miami Shores.
Hi, good evening. Win Dang with DDEC. I am a traffic engineer, so I am here to support the team with any analysis that we will be producing to support the data.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kimberly Spence. I'm Assistant Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of West Palm Beach. Thank you for coming.
And I'm Charity Lewis. I'm the Civic Engagement Supervisor for the City of West Palm Beach.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for your introductions. And with that, we'll kick it over to Tony to lead the presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to run through the presentation. We did our introductions. We're going to do the presentation. There's a brief activity, and then we can have some Q&A. As I said, I'm principal of Street Plans. We do a variety of public space design activation projects all around the country. We work with New York City bids, the meatpacking bids, Soho. We're working on a waterfront plan with San Francisco right now with the Embarcadero. And we also do a lot of transportation planning, bicycles, pedestrians. And we do everything from the high-level stuff, the stuff that we're talking about today, all the way to implementation, to getting the actual, stripes on the ground or the trees planted and all that good stuff, and everything in between. Jennifer introduced the team. I think we can go on from there. So what's the point of this effort? What is the focus area? And it's really about thinking about how you all want to see the waterfront develop and change over time, if at all, between Flagler Memorial Bridge and the Royal Park Bridge. We're going to look at how the waterfront is used, and not just the waterfront, that sliver of land that is directly adjacent to the waterfront, but the public spaces and streets that are adjacent to it, those spaces that bring you to the waterfront. How are those used, and how can they be designed to encourage use of the waterfront? And what's the vision for this waterfront? It's okay for it to be a light touch. That's an answer. Or we want to do something, crazy like other cities are doing. Your waterfront is one of your biggest assets. It's an economic development generator. It is your public space, and it puts you on stage with other peer cities around the country and around the world that have vibrant and active waterfronts, and they use them in a variety of different ways. So what I want to try to do is talk to you about the effort that we've done so far since January and give you a little, within the time that we've got, a little bit of a sort of range of waterfront public spaces around the country so that you can start to place where you think West Palm Beach is. Are you a natural waterfront? It's not so much about what I think, it's about what your perception is as much as what the reality is on the ground. And then what are those tools that we might use to improve if there is room for improvement? Maybe there's something that you see here today, or you're on your way home and you start to think about things. So you don't know what you don't know, right? And part of this is helping you to have a visual language to define what you like and what you don't like. So what are the project components? One is an existing conditions analysis. That's us understanding the context, talking to city staff, your other department heads, other property owners, and entities that use the waterfront on a regular basis. We're doing this community visioning exercise. We're going to do another 2 workshops around the city, same presentation, same activities, and we're also doing stakeholder interviews. Most of those have already been done, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We did our survey. We're also going to walk around with focus groups around the waterfront, talk to them about their specific issues, the things that matter to them most. And then we're going to look at strategies over the long term, short term and long term. What does that mean? What are these strategies? So we think about this in 4 big buckets, and start to think about the waterfront when you use it and when you see other waterfronts in these 4 buckets, because this is how we're going to translate the recommendations. And this is all going to be online. You can have a copy of the presentation. I see you taking furious notes. So the first is programming. How do you use those public spaces? That's active events. You do a lot of events, right? So how are you doing those? What are the logistic pain points and what's working well versus what's not working? Scale of events. Do you lean too much on the heavy side of large-scale events? Do you have enough passive events? What about play events or recreational events? All these questions are part of that bucket. Access. How do you get to the waterfront? So that's as simple as transit and walking and biking and driving. How do you park? And then the other sort of hidden thing that most people don't understand or think about when it comes to access is, how do you actually access the water? You don't have an opportunity in this section of the waterfront to actually engage the water in any meaningful way. So I'm going to show you some pretty interesting examples of how cities design the wall or whatever that edge condition is to allow for people to actually interact with the water. Physical design. This is the stuff most people think about when they think about public space design. The trees, the lighting, the shade structures. What does the built environment around the site look like? So when I'm going to show you the case studies, you're going to see places that are very rural, not rural, or small town. Their buildings don't necessarily meet the street in the way that yours do. And then other examples that are very urban. And then stewardship. This is another one people sleep on. Who's taking care of this space? And do you have a comprehensive, thought-out approach, or is it Parks and Rec does one thing, and Community Services does another thing, and everybody's doing their own events and their own things? You'll see that some of the best public spaces, public waterfront spaces, have an entity that's responsible. And they're responsible for planning, and then they're responsible for collecting this community vision and executing the vision in a comprehensive way so that it keeps on moving forward. So where are we in our timeline? We've already done a bunch of our listening sessions, our stakeholder meetings, executed our survey, read through a lot of your previous documents. You've done a lot of studies about the waterfront over the past 20 years. We're doing our outreach now with you all, the public, over the next 2 weeks. And then we're going to go back, put our thinking caps on, and start to organize what those strategies and the recommendations for next steps are within the parameter or the structure of those 4 buckets. And so that it's clear up front, we're not recommending a specific thing. I'm not going to say in this report, add 50 trees to the waterfront. That's not what this is about. And it's not going to be about adding a marina. I know, how many of you are here because of the marina discussion? Quite a few. Okay, this is not about the marina. The marina conversation led to a really thoughtful series of conversations, which is, what should the future of the waterfront be? If it's, let's just keep it as it is, we like it, and what are the tweaks that we can do? That is an answer. That's 100% okay. So I don't come into this saying we're going to do a marina, and I've told this to Jennifer ahead of time and everybody, it's a very big hill for me to climb to imagine that I'm going to make a recommendation to study a marina on your public waterfront, right? Considering that I think you already have a bunch of boats there already. Okay, existing conditions analysis. You've done a lot of studies, and we were a part of the Shore Decor project with Happy Cities, where we did a research project. For those of you who have been involved with the waterfront for that long, that was a very fun project for us, very temporary, and we measured people's happiness on the waterfront. It was an interesting study, and we can talk about that another day. But there's been a lot of visions and a lot of things that have happened, not only for the waterfront, but citywide, as it relates to placemaking, public realm, streets, and, you know, to a certain extent, things happen, and the city has developed in really dramatic ways over the past 20 years. But there's a lot of things that really haven't ever gotten done, and that still remain to be done. So I think part of what our effort is trying to tie up loose ends and say, you need a comprehensive plan. That's not what this is. It's more about the high-level strategy. Maybe one of our outcomes is you need a plan that is the plan that you're basing infrastructure improvements on and the actual structure of this whole thing moving forward. So things that we're looking at right now, in the bucket of programming, we're looking at all of your events, all of the events that you do right now, the big ones and the little ones, the weddings, I have a spreadsheet of 500 events that you all did in 2023 in any of the waterfront public spaces. That's not just the strip of land, that's the Lakeside Pavilion and the amphitheater. That's a lot of events. That's incredible for a city of your size to have this density and intensity of events. And that's a really good thing, actually, because it means that you're attracting regionally. And Kevin's going to talk about the fact that a lot of people come. I'm not going to take away your point. Let me not give it away. The farmers market, hugely successful. We're also looking at the lease agreements with your major events, Sunfest and the Boat Show, the documents, the legal documents that in many ways drive a lot of economic activity to the waterfront and to your downtown, but also tie the city's hands in what they're able to do or not do. The reason the waterfront is the way it is in so many ways is because of these lease agreements. So like, let's look at them and have conversations with our partners. They're like, this isn't working for one of the partners more than the other partner. And then Kevin's going to talk about data regarding who's coming to the city, who's spending money here, you know, other sort of growth trends over time that are really super interesting. The city's also done public life analysis. You have no shortage of consultants who have come over the last 10 years to give you advice about your public spaces. So Kevin, talk about demographics and the cool things that you've already learned so far.
Sure. So we've looked at a lot of different areas of data. We want to understand the real estate conditions in the area. We want to understand the demographics citywide and even regionally, but especially also of downtown and how's the residential base changed downtown. But one of the things we really want to understand is what are the trends of the visitors and the people who are already using the waterfront. It is really a regional destination. It is drawing regionally about 1.6 million visits over the last 12 months, or in 2023, I'm sorry, by about 700,000 different individuals. And what we see is that almost 60% of those visits are coming from people who live more than 10 miles away. So again, it reinforces that idea of it as a regional destination. One of the things we look at is what do they do before they get to the waterfront? Where do they stop? What do they do after they leave the waterfront? One thing we see when they visit is a lot of patronage to downtown restaurants that they're not doing when they are elsewhere the days they're not at the waterfront. But we're not seeing a lot of trends outside of the restaurants in terms of other types of shops, clothing stores, beauty. You know, we see that happening more in their neighborhoods and more closer to where they live. But we'll be looking at that and trying to understand better what other things that they do that maybe can help generate additional economic activity downtown that maybe they don't know exist in downtown. They know the restaurants are there, but maybe they don't know that there's these other things that they're doing somewhere else. Maybe they're doing it on the way home. so we can help create that awareness. Is this the only slide? Okay. One thing that we did find as well, even though it is regional and people are traveling for it, out of those 1.6 million visits, 900,000 of those visits, more than half, were by people who visited the waterfront at least 30 times in the last 12 months. So the loyalty to that area as a place to go is really strong. It's over 75% of the visitors who come to it, we would designate as loyal, not casual visitors. We see good utilization building up during the day and especially the afternoon, but the peak of utilization being in the evening, sort of from 6 to 8, almost into 9 o'clock, where we're seeing a lot of that utilization, and really the highest use by far being on Saturdays. That's a little bit of just what we've been looking at so far. I think one of the other things we saw is increases in just the number of visitors. I mentioned 2023, 1.6 million visits to the waterfront. Before the pandemic, we used 2019 as a baseline to understand what was happening before the pandemic kind of did what it did, and how recovery has gone. In 2019, it was around 850,000, 900,000. So the growth in both unique visitors and the number of times they visit has had really strong, steady growth, probably some of the strongest growth that we see in any sort of area that we do that sort of analyze. So it's positioned really well for, continue to be that regional attraction and be something that can be positioned for the right types of uses and revitalization that ultimately comes out of the recommendations.
Nice, thank you. And I think that number, the loyalty number that you just said, is really important, because if you look at this map, you might say, well, those people are coming for Sunfest or whatever, a special event. But that's actually not the case. They're coming back multiple times. And maybe they will come to an event, but they're coming for other reasons as well. So what have we heard so far? This is about the community engagement and our conversations with folks. We've met with every single department head in the city, talked to them about the issues in their focus area: police, Parks and Rec, so the DDA, the CRA. And everybody's got their own angle and their own sort of way of looking at the waterfront. Resiliency, they wanted to talk about the actual structure and climate change, sea level rise. Like, how are we factoring that into this? And what is the long-term play there? The police, they were worried about homelessness. What are the lessons learned from other cities that we can apply to this space? And so when we talk to all these folks, those recommendations or those comments are filtering in as much as what you're all going to tell us tonight. As far as other outside stakeholders, we have talked to Sunfest. We're going to talk to the boat show folks next week or the week after. And then we're doing some walking tours with other folks, homeowners in downtown, merchants, transportation-related advocates and professionals. So what have we heard? Nothing that's going to be a surprise, I think, to anybody here. Homelessness is a problem. How do we address this? For your events, we need back of house, like storage of materials. And for a city that has that volume of events, carting out, tables and trays. I was out there today and watching the sort of orchestration of execution of programming is challenging if you don't have the right infrastructure on site or close by, right? And there's always a sort of tension to get the right, to not give your waterfront prime retail space to storage, even though you kind of need it. Flexibility is important. When we talked to Sunfest, they said, look, we're open to working with you. It's important for us to be able to move things around, and the more fixed things that are in place, they're just in the way of our event, which, depends on how we design around that, but that's an interesting consideration, right? The seawall. We're going to talk about how we access the water. I think people think about the waterfront as being this traditional wall, and that's it. But there's other ways of approaching the seawall. You don't have a plan for that. We're not going to do a plan for that as part of this, but we might say, you need to study this. Like, this is a very important thing that sets up the whole rest of it, because all of the infrastructure that you might need for some of the other recommendations would go into the seawall, right? It's like your stormwater and all the other stuff. And then the lease restrictions we talked about. We did our survey effort. I think it's well over now 1,000. I think it's 1,200. Charisma and her team have gone door to door, really tried to get people from a variety of walks of life to answer the survey. And I'm not going to go through the survey results, and I'm happy to share them when we close the survey, but the vast majority of people who are answering live or work within a 5-minute walk or bike ride. Just people who are invested because they're there all the time, right? And when I asked the question, how many of you have taken the survey? Oh, okay, all right. When I asked the question, what's most important to you within those 4 buckets? I asked, with programming, is this okay? Do we not need to touch this? Is this working fine? Or we can tweak it a little bit? Or this is terrible? Or this is not working? It's a deterrent for me to go into town or to use the waterfront. The majority of the thought is, or the biggest response is, we can tweak this in each of those categories. When it comes to access, actually the majority of people said, I love this, don't touch it. So that's interesting, but I'm not going to read into that just yet. Most people use the waterfront in the comments section, so we had a lot of comments, exercise, just going to sit and contemplate life or look at the ocean, going to the green market, your events. Most people feel good about the waterfront, which is nice. It's not, even in spite of the homelessness, which came up over and over. The keywords when I scanned the comments was homeless, traffic, parking. Like, not a surprise, right? But that's just how it always goes. Top desired improvements, when you look at the more thoughtful comments, were shade. You don't have a whole lot of shade. Palm trees don't give you shade. They're pretty. They're of this place, but they don't give you shade. Water fountains, bathrooms, right? Easily accessible bathrooms. Top concerns are speeding, and that was often paired with traffic, speeding and traffic on Flagler. And then the homeless problem, and no to the marina. We had one question that was, do you support having another marina? And it's like 80 or 90% no, for the people that answered the survey. Okay, so let's talk about examples of what I mean by each of these 4 categories. Programming, we talked about programming. I summarized all of them so far. Your city does, in a finer grain, you have 38 event days per year, 250 events just in the Lake Pavilion. Not all of them are hosted by the city, but there's a cost to the city to maintain that and provide services, right? Which you charge people for that, but it's still a logistical sort of issue. So the questions we're asking, not only you all, but ourselves as we look at other waterfronts and what's appropriate for you is, what's the right event mix? Do you have too many large festivals? Do you have not enough recreational, easy yoga in the park? So what is the mix of active and passive? And also, what is the role of the city? Do you all encourage or have a method for somebody in this audience to go out and put on a cool event that is public? Or is it just always on the city to do that? And how do you encourage that to happen? Because that can happen. There are people that just, they're do-gooders. They want to put on an event. And if you make it difficult for them, then they just can't do it because of liability or other issues. What's missing from the current mix of programming? What do you wish was happening on the waterfront that you go to other places for, or you simply don't get access to because it's not there? Think about these things. You don't have to have an answer tonight. And I'm going to, I didn't put my email. I will figure out a way of putting my email up here. If you have an idea at any time, just email me a thought, whatever it is. Also, is there any art-based programming? What are you think about other cities like the Rose Kennedy Greenway in Boston, that is this green space above the Big Dig. If you go there today, it is an art trail. And it's one public space with these vintage signs. Super cool. So there's an art programming component that most people don't think is programming because you think of programming as being an event that somebody hosts, but those things attract people. So what are the other destinations or the things that attract people beyond just the water? Or are there water-based activities? I'm going to show you some images of things like, who's heard of Little Island in New York City, Manhattan? It's a man-made, bizarre-looking public space that they made in the East River, and it's super cool. It's very New York, because it's artificial and probably takes a lot of money to maintain. But it's interesting, and it's in the water. You have to cross a bridge to inhabit this space. Do you want to do more of that? It doesn't have to be a lot. Access. Again, how do people get there? And then how do people interact with the waterfront itself? So these are really interesting from the city of Copenhagen. It's a catalog about waterfront design. And I can share the link with you for those of you who want to sort of geek out on this. But so many details about how they have thought about interacting with the water. Steps into the water, built docks into the water, cantilever docks, paths into and around the water. You have a language of docks, floating docks already, but we think of them as just for boats. But they don't necessarily have to be just for boats, right? They could be public space or just amenities for people to go out and experience the intense wind in the afternoon or whatever it is. And then also the detailing leading up to that edge. Is there an edge that you can sit down and look out onto the water? Right now you can in a bench, but it feels very sort of sterile. Physical design. So what does the hardscape and the landscaping look like? How do buildings face the public realm? You guys are really far ahead, I think, on this. Like, as far as, compared with other places that have a waterfront where buildings don't front the street, where people don't actually live right there or work right there, you're doing quite well. I think the urbanism and the codes that you've developed over the past 20 years have done a really great job. But then, for example, the Great Lawn, think about the edge condition and where you feel like you want to walk into the Great Lawn. And where there's just stuff, little walls and planters and stuff that's in the way that just, it feels like a million miles away, even though it's only 5 feet away or 10 feet away. So maybe there's tweaks to that public space to make it even more inviting. The trellises may have seemed like a good idea at the time that they were built. But I think there's a lot of clutter there right now. That's my personal opinion. But where do you have shade? Is there an opportunity for shade? Maybe shade is art, a rotating shade exhibit or something like that. And again, where are these water-based activities? Is that just too far-fetched for that space, for the intercoastal? Is the intercoastal just kind of like feel like too dangerous to put stuff out into it? So when we think about these elements, the physical design elements, there's this range, and it goes from the landscaping and things that occur up here, lighting, things that are hanging, shade. There are structures, kiosks, could be to get a cafecito, a little coffee on the water, or something like that. Other types of structures that are movable. Remember, flexibility, I think, is something that we're going to look at. Play. You have no play on the waterfront right now. Or even, and I haven't noticed this in the responses to the survey. I thought I was going to see this more. People needing a doggy park or somewhere that is more active for dogs. Like, people do walk their dogs there, but is there a dog park, something that's actually designed for that? Here's some of what that looks like. Public art, that's here already. Play elements that are fun. There's things that you can do that are not just buildings, but there are some buildings, pop-ups. And then thinking about, this is the ferry arch in San Francisco. We're working with the Fisherman's Wharf right now, and one of the things that we're doing with them is leveraging these cool historic buildings as moments that are Instagrammable, for lack of a better term, right? Like art, public art, but also your architecture and the history of that place is the draw, right? People go to San Francisco for a lot of the architecture. So use it as a moment. We're in a place that lacks history in a lot of ways. So we have to make it up with other sort of spectacles. That's kind of what the thing is. Do you sprinkle 1 or 2 spectacles along the waterfront that are interesting that people are going to return to over time? And then stewardship. I talked about this a little bit. I'm showing 2 images. Stewardship is super boring, and it goes unnoticed most of the time, except when you see how professional and well done public spaces are activated and the long-term development of those public spaces to sort of manage the development and execution of these public spaces. This is the Garment District bid in New York City. Constant design and iteration. They are the agents that work with the city to make sure that the street gets reconstructed or that they do interesting public art. The Fisherman's Wharf CBD, our client in San Francisco, is hyper-focused on this area. They're the ones that take out the tables and chairs every day. They have a team of people that are doing that monitor the vending activities, that monitor the homeless activities, right? These things are not left to San Francisco police, right? So there's a reason why things fall through the cracks, is because people have citywide priorities, and this is just one part of the city. But if you had an entity that was just for this, maybe it would get more attention. Okay, now wrapping up here in terms of the academic part of it. I'm going to show you some examples of different waterfront spaces. They're not at all like the West Palm Beach waterfront. They're all going to be very different. I want you to see what they look like and think about, reflect on where you are in that. As a city, what your values are. There's going to be ones that are more passive and natural, ones that are just regional in scale, some that have water related, some that rely more on programming. And the important thing is, what is the level of 24-hour activity and the intensity of stuff that's there, right? And then what is the management structure? So this is your baseline. You've got 0.8 miles of our study area. Arguably, maybe the outcome of this is like, your waterfront is actually much larger. And as I was doing the presentation, I learned something. I'm always learning when I'm doing the presentation, because when I have to explain it to you all, I have to learn also about, how I'm applying our principles to this place. So, this is one emerging outcome, is like, maybe this is a regional play for your whole waterfront, not just this area, because that's how other cities have actually done it. But for our study for this is just 0.8 miles, starting with just 3 hours north here in Sarasota. Bay Park is a very small park. It's a little nook in their downtown that has a few buildings that line it. It's 53 acres, but it's a very teeny length that goes into a little sort of harbor. And it's managed by a nonprofit and has a master plan, and the nonprofit executes a master plan, and they have a trust that's in charge of it for maintaining it. But it's very much on the natural side. So there's mangroves all around there. There's some play elements. It's not meant to be a regional destination. It just exists for the residents and for people to use on a daily basis. So it's a question. To what extent is this a regional place? And do you want it to continue to be? Or how much more stuff for you guys do you put in this, right? The Memphis River Garden, I love this example. Memphis River Parks is an organization that's been around for quite a long time, and they're managed by an organization that was in charge of creating a master plan, and they're executing the master plan. And if you've been to Memphis, they have a town. Memphis is actually a very large geographic area, but their downtown, there's urban buildings from the early 20th century that face the street. It's very similar. Their downtown condition, where some of this stuff happens, is very similar to what you all have, because Court Street and Front Street is the name of the street that separates their waterfront park from downtown, and it's like 5 lanes. And it feels like, it's much larger than Flagler, but not in terms of width, but in terms of number of lanes. It's probably the same width. But it feels like a divider. But when you get onto the other side, the width of the actual park is quite wide. It's much wider than what you've got, or the sort of little sliver that you have. But what they use it for is, it's recreational. It's very soft, very green, and there is play, but it's mostly about just chilling out, and it's a park space. But again, it's managed by an entity, and it's not heavy on programming. It doesn't feel like you guys necessarily, but there's things I like about it, like the Memphis River Commission that actually manages it. Here's the one that I thought was very similar to yours, and it's in Philadelphia. It's on the Delaware River, 5 miles worth of riverfront, and it's also managed by a nonprofit. But since it's 5 miles, They don't activate the whole thing. There's moments where it's activated. And they have these really cool barges that they bring in during the summer for summer activities, and then they also have winter activities that they swap out, which I thought was really interesting. They've got also a pretty heavy-duty, not highway, but an urban highway, not an elevated one. So it's very heavy on the programming and bringing people there. I think it's different from you all in that you all have people right there. You know, like, there's a certain amount of activity that you can put on the waterfront for the people who live there and work there right now, and then another density or intensity of programming that you put to bring people. See, some of this is really cool. It's an ice skating rink, a floating ice skating rink in the middle of the Delaware River. That's a roller skating rink. Here's a very small site, perhaps more similar to you all in terms of the urban context. It's an urban site, Sparkman Wharf in Tampa, very small. This is a little nook that's part of a development, basically. It's not a public space in any meaningful way, but you could imagine something like this somewhere along the waterfront here that has commerce, that has an additional reason for people to go out. Different types of food and dining. And then also some of the programming that you're already doing. So finally, the most intense version of all this. I've shown you some that are small and natural, larger and natural, in between, small and urban. This is big and urban, okay? How many of you have been to the District Wharf, the wharf in Washington, D.C.? Okay. The wharf, most people don't know, is actually not public space. It's basically developer-owned and managed. And there's a bunch of hotels and office buildings, other residential buildings that line it. It's really interesting because it has very active maritime uses, not dissimilar from what you have right now. But the wharf itself, the space between the buildings and the water, is fully pedestrianized. It's a little bit of a shared use concept, which is a European concept in street design, where some of the hotels are allowed to bring their cars or, like valet drop off. But for the most part, it is intended to be for pedestrians. And they heavily program it. And the other cool thing is, like in the winter, they have s'mores and they also have an ice skating rink and a lot of commerce. At the northern end here, you'll find, if you ever go there, just check it out. It's actually quite interesting. Old DC, like 1970s and 60s era, like maritime seafood places, like crab and like totally different vibe. The wharf is super hipster and then all of a sudden you're in the county fair looking buildings, like flashing bulbs and things. It's actually really interesting. The mixture of old and new I find to be one of the things that makes it more interesting, because if it were all like this, super sterile, I don't know that it would be as successful. I mean, maybe it would be, but not to people like me. And then this one is not waterfront, but I thought it was still a really cool case study about how you create a regional art walk or trail around a city. The Beltline, very, very popular and well-known, managed by a nonprofit. And they place equity and arts of different types. That's performance, music, and the arts that we usually think of, sculpture and murals, at the center of the design of this trail. It is not as much about walking and biking as it is about experiencing these places. And what it has unlocked in economic development along that trail, different breweries and buildings and things facing that public space, is unbelievable. That people would never have guessed that could have happened. Okay, so we're gonna do a fun little exercise here. How many of you were planning on going to one of the other public meetings? Are you still gonna go to the other public meetings after this? You are, okay, maybe, okay. I have another activity that is better for more people, and I'm gonna save it for then. For this, get out your phones. This is a digital survey that we can see the live results. When you're all on there, I will go to the actual website and do the questions live with you. Okay, so the first question is going to be about, in a word, what do you feel about the waterfront? How do you feel about it now? What do you love about it? There's no wrong answer. Everybody good? No. Okay. I'm going to the questions. It's okay if you've already gone ahead. Okay. In a word, what do you love about the waterfront? Views. Open, beautiful, variety, peaceful, relaxing, peace and air, free. Free is good. I love it. I love it. Events. Okay. 24. Anybody still voting? What word describes a character? This is different than what you love. Could be the same thing that you love. You can't get on? You're trying with this thing right here? I'm going to go back to the initial thing. Try again. No. So, what do you love about the waterfront? What is the character? 22 people have answered. Natural. That's important. Boats, yes. Evolved. Okay. Iffy. Okay. Trendy, funky, boring, lackluster. Okay. Peaceful and natural, again, there's that word natural. Yeah. I like seeing natural there. We're good? Okay. What word describes your vision for the future? What do you want to see happen as part of this, in a word? Okay. I'm sorry. Sure. No. You guys got it? Thank you so much. Okay. Vision for the waterfront. Welcoming, natural again, green space, tidy, status quo. No gentrification, cleaner docks, accessible, activated, all. Okay. All right, 33. Now everybody's voted. Okay, 34. Enjoyment. Okay, what's the biggest challenge that you see based on what we just saw, your own life experience? Parking, homelessness, homeless crime, green space, homeless and sketchy people, the unhoused. Minimizing commercialization, making it non-commercial, lack of amenities. Resistance to change. Two more people. Okay, this is a ranking. How important are the following when you think about the waterfront and improving it and what we should be taking away from this meeting? Water-related activities and interactions in the manner of what I described, things floating out into the water, or you're walking into the water, your ability to actually interact with the water. Is that important? More programming, better stewardship, addressing traffic, addressing homelessness. Okay. More shade, more trees, vegetation, or nothing. Okay. You're good? Okay. 22. Okay. This is super helpful. So, okay, we've got a couple more people coming in. 1.2% of you say nothing needs to be improved. Majority of you say addressing homelessness, very important, and better stewardship. More programming is at the very bottom, just next to nothing. I mean, like, not next to, but the least important is having more of it. Okay. Okay, and then we have two more questions. In terms of the water question, is this important? Should we spend time on this? Or do you all feel like, don't spend energy on this? There can be more water-based activities. Okay, one person. Right, and it's a sort of grade here. Should we do just what we have? Should we spend time on it or not? And how much? Should there be a lot of stuff in the water? Should we really think about that more than not? What's that? Current level, I'll interpret current level as less as well. You think less. Who thinks less? Less water-based activities. Okay, that's a good number of people. Okay. Maybe. Okay. I will say it's not an even split, especially with those of you who say less activities. You're probably down here, or equal with significantly more. Okay, this is the final question. Thinking about the case studies that we just looked at, where do you think the character is of your waterfront? If you had to double down on one of those examples or another, do you want it to be more natural? Or passive, or more urban? This does not mean that. Why? Okay. Okay. Sure. If you go into it with cynicism and a negative attitude, you don't get anything out of it. And that's really, you have to go into it with an open mind and think, what about those examples that I showed are relevant to you? Do you want more activities like Philadelphia? It's not about modeling Philadelphia. That's a very narrow way of looking at it. So, for example, Sarasota is a very small site, very different. But if you want more nature, then that's what we get out of that. Okay. Which one's the what? The blue one? Sarasota. That was the natural. The yellow is the Wharf. That was the most urban one. Red is Philadelphia. That is park space between punctuated points of events or activity. And then Memphis was just a sort of passive linear park. I think you're somewhere between Philly and Memphis, for what it's worth, in terms of type, but it's not like a science. So that's it. That's the presentation. We can open it up to questions. Here are key questions for you to all think about moving forward. Please reflect on the presentation and don't just think that there's some outcome that's coming out of this. I promise that there's not. If you want to talk to me or email me, I'm super available. I'm happy to talk. Think about what you want to have from this effort and what the waterfront means to you. What do you want to see for the vision? If it's keeping it the same, it's keeping it the same. What can we learn from those other cities? Is there something that works in another place that we could bring here? And how do you leverage what's already working to make it better? There's so many great things that are already happening on your waterfront. What's missing physically and in terms of the activities? And then are there other iconic things that you can think of that you would want to have happen? And what's that balance between active and nature? I mean, that's the conversation we've had, right? There's a lot of people that said nature, a lot of people said, make it more lively, and there's a balancing act there. And then natural versus formal. You have a very formally designed waterfront right now. It's not very soft in terms of the edge. So is there a balance to that? So that's it. Questions? You, sir, you had a question?
If there's any questions, excuse me, if you can please come up to the mic so that we can.
I can give it. Here. You don't have to stand. You go for it.
I'd just like you to give us a choice. One of the choices should be no change at all.
No change at all is a choice in the survey. It's been a choice, and I said it over and over. If you want to keep it how it is, that's a choice, 100%. 100%.
So I just had two questions. On the stats, you said that more than 60% for overall visitors to the waterfront over the course of the year came at least 10 miles away. Does that include, obviously, Sunfest and Boat Show? If you pull those two events out, can you then, do we have a way of knowing how many of that is, you see what I'm saying? Because obviously they distort the overall statistics.
We do have a way of pulling that out, and we can even see who's doing the repeat and such. And I have already made a note to do that. I went back to look at what some of those weekly numbers were. And so out of, I think it's 1.7 million in 2023, the boat show within that, not necessarily all to the boat show.
Right.
Because there's going to be a baseline of regular users kind of coming through that area. But the overall for there, when it's in generally maybe 25 to high 30,000s a week, was in more of the high 40s to 50s for that week. And then for Sunfest, higher in maybe the 60s for that week. So Sunfest, 60,000 out of 1.7 million.
Okay. I just was thinking that it would be interesting to know how many visitors are going to the waterfront who are not coming to one of these mega events, which we have two. And the only other question I had was, you said 38 days of the year were events were happening in the waterfront, not the pavilion, but the waterfront. That certainly doesn't include setup and breakdown, because the boat show alone is 4 weeks for a 4-day event.
Right.
So the waterfront looks like a dumpster for 4 weeks, and we have a 4-day boat show. That's what we get out of it.
Right.
Any other questions?
Is there ever any talk about closing Clematis Street, filling in with more dining, outside dining, art sculptures, fun vendors, kid
in the street.
activities? Right, just close it off.
There is an ongoing discussions. We currently do that during the Green Market, so we do that throughout season during Green Market, but it's not an ongoing discussion, but it couldn't be something that is considered if it's part of this discussion.
I know traveling around, I see during the COVID, they did close streets so that they could have more outside eating because of the COVID. And a lot of towns are voting to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't let the street open up again.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Thank you.
Hey, Tony, if you could just give us a little information about what you were talking about earlier about the storage issue, that certain major cities have storage for what, how much do you need, for what purposes, things like that.
Oh, so think about the things that you need on a regular basis. To the gentleman's point about the setup, inhabiting, like I saw it today, the tent that was left over. If you have to wait for those things to be taken to some off-site location, somewhere around here, let's say, like you wait for transportation. Whereas if it's, I'm not saying that it's going to be in this, but if it were like as proximate as the pavilion building, then it gets put away that day. And that's the level of like storage and logistics that other cities have worked out in other ways, or you have a management district that goes out right away and picks it all up, right? And tables and chairs, and think of the stuff that you use on a regular basis. Also, a bid or a district, not dissimilar from your DDA, but something that's more focused just on public space, would have branded stuff, umbrellas and signage that they take out and put away on a regular basis. And that stuff gets put away. Or audio equipment. The stuff in this room, like this is for a public meeting. The stuff that needs to be deployed constantly. Could be planters without plants, or traffic control. I've seen traffic control cones for bids that do public space events in the street.
How large a facility are you talking about?
Oh, whatever you can get your hands on. I mean, that's like half of this room would be phenomenal. A quarter of this room would be phenomenal. The Miami DDA, which is a totally different DDA than yours because of the context, the built environment in downtown Miami, there's no shortage of vacant storefronts. They use a vacant storefront. And so on the second floor of that, there's a bunch of IKEA bistro tables and chairs that we use, umbrellas, anything that they use for a public event. During COVID, they had parklet stuff. Parklets are the public spaces that they put into like parking spaces that you saw a lot of during COVID. Any public space furniture that needs to be deployed. Oh. No, the lady back there. Yeah, you first. No, you.
Oh.
Yeah.
I lived in Austin, Texas. I lived in Houston, Texas. Austin has an amazing outdoor area for families. We don't have that here. They have Barton Springs. They have a train going around the whole entire thing. It is absolutely amazing. It goes on for hours. Kids love it. Families come down free. Houston has Kima. It's on the waterfront. It's amazing. You know, merry-go-rounds, the whole thing. What we lack is family outdoor activities. We really do lack, you said it. You know, we lack that, and we really need something like that. We already have all the fancy stores and the fancy restaurants and all that. We need a family area.
Thank you. No Chuck E. Cheese. Boba. My kids love boba.
This might be for later, but a suggestion when he was talking about storage. What if we kill two birds with one stone and make a storage facility that's also functional? Like whether it's for seating, if you design it in a way that we know what type of materials we need to store, we can design it to fit those things.
Totally.
Something artistic or functional, that way it's not like a big building.
A multi-purpose space. I'm surprised that the Lakeside Pavilion was not designed with some storage. More storage. But the gentleman?
This gentleman back here had his hand up before. Did you still want?
Kind of. Good evening. Thank you for your presentation.
My pleasure.
My interest is in tranquility at the waterfront.
Okay.
And I question whether there shouldn't be a true traffic study to see if Flagler Drive is really required to have 4 lanes going north and south. Secondly, the Great Lawn, I've been down here since 1980. The Great Lawn was deliberately not shaded because Sunfest for 1 week uses that area, and the city acquiesced to that request. And I also want to mention I was involved with a homeless consultant, and our group was very much disturbed that he told us eventually that his report had to be changed because the city would not pay him unless he did so. So I'm hoping for true objectivity from you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got it. On Flagler, maybe I know this is going to be controversial, but I tend to agree with you. It's to me much wider than it needs to be for the amount of volume that you have there. I don't have the number right in front of me, but just observationally, except for moments where you have traffic.
If I can add, we have the previous traffic engineer here,
This
Wendan.
is the previous city traffic engineer.
The city traffic engineer, and to reiterate what she just told me, there's actually less traffic on Flagler than there is in Sapodilla. So I think your statements are warranted.
This gentleman.
Yeah, one of the problems we have is that the boat show dictates everything.
I know.
Okay? Let's get down to the point.
Yeah.
Informa runs the city, and the boat show is the main thing. We want a dog park downtown? No, you can't have a dog park downtown because Informa wants that space. So this is really basically what you're doing is never going to happen. What we're going to get is a marina. That's what the city wants, and that's what Informa wants. They've come down, they want to put they want to take away the Meyer Amphitheater. They wanted to knock down the berms. All this stuff is crazy. And to ruin a waterfront by putting mega yachts out there is crazy. But this is what the city wants. Somebody's being paid.
Well, I'll tell you and the gentleman. Okay. Thank you for your comments.
Just to follow up on this gentleman's scheme, let's try to remember something. If this is for the residents of Palm Beach City, right? Let's remember that the median income in Palm Beach City is $34,000 a year. So if somebody has the nerve to put a marina in any portion of that space, who can afford it? For argument's sake, City of Miami charges you $23 a foot. So if I had a 30-foot boat and I kept it in Dinnicky, I left when it got up to $500. If you did that today, it would be $690 a month. And if you're making $34,000 a year, how are you going to do that? If you're making $60,000 a year, how are you going to do that? I agree with this gentleman. The city wants to ram it down our throats, and I think it's wrong.
We'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll be around to just have a chat with those who want to stay here. But we'll take a couple more comments before we wrap it up.
Well, I'm much more of an optimist.
Good.
And I hope and I think the city heard, including the mayor, heard loud and clear from the residents last year that we do not want a marina. And the city has to provide for all age groups, all races, all income, including people that don't have access to a mega yacht and waterways. And I see, my husband and I walk the waterway every day, and we see people start work in the morning, having their coffee, looking out at the beautiful water to get some stress relief. I see people after work walking the water with their dogs to get stress relief. Generations come, grandparents bring their kids because there's a dock they can go on. There's a mangrove that maybe they'll see a manatee or some beautiful birds. So I'm an optimist, so I hope that we can keep this and only beautify it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If I may add, there's been a lot of discussion or some latter comments in terms of what our intentions are. And for those of you that weren't here when we got here, our intentions are exactly to do what ma'am just described, which is to get your feedback, to have a more inclusive waterfront. I mean, we were doing some community engagement, and we heard from residents in the North End that they never come to the marina, to the waterfront because there's nothing there, and then they're upset that there's this idea or concept that would not allow or invite them to come in. So we want to create an environment that is conducive to all residents of the city, not just those that live in the downtown, not just those that are coming to visit the restaurants. We want to make it more inclusive for those who don't utilize that space. And we want to make it an environment where we have residents in the downtown that want to stay living in the downtown. So we're trying to balance all of those varying needs in various neighborhoods and various age groups. So that's what we're doing here. We want to hear from the larger community. We've gone above and beyond in terms of a community engagement strategy. And whatever data we gather is going to be public data to all of you. There is nothing that we're trying to, all of you will have access to that data. And time will tell what will come out of that report. And we're excited to be able to do that. And again, this is the first meeting we're having. We're going to have a couple of more. We're going to have some meeting with downtown residents. And we're going to continue to have the survey open. So not just for the folks that are here, but for those in the community at large. So I just want to make that very clear that that is why we are here, to listen to you and see what do you really want to see? What is going to make our waterfront better? Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you taking any more questions?
Yeah, let him speak, let him speak.
This gentleman over here had a question. Oh, no, sorry, on the other side, with the pink on.
Did you have a question?
I think some of the animosity that you hear is because people were kind of surprised by a decision to put a marina in, last year. And I think if you could describe kind of the decision process you'll go through and the transparency that you'll have with the information that you collect here, I think that might put a lot of people's, mind at ease that, hey, we will see what your thoughts are and your plans are well before it goes to city council or planning board or whatever the next step is when something's actually going to be implemented. So if you kind of describe, what we'll see at the end of this process, that'd be great.
Sure. So now, as Tony reiterated, and great question, and thank you for those comments. What we're doing now is the data gathering process. As we stated, we went back and we talked to different departments. We were looking at the data. We're talking to the residents. We're doing the meetings. We're doing the survey. We're in that data gathering phase of getting all the information that we need. Once that's all gathered, based on the different data that we gather, we're going to put together a report. It's going to talk about existing conditions. It's going to talk about the efforts that we're doing here. It's going to talk about proposed recommendations based on what we heard from everyone. All of these meetings are public. We're recording this meeting right now, where the other meetings are also going to be recorded. So there is nothing and no conversation that we're having that you're not going to have purview to. And once that report is completed, and we haven't really thought, I think we need to give the commission some discretion to look at it and review it before it's made public, but we are going to go before the city commission, the city administration, and present some of our findings. So that is the process in terms of transparency. And again, all of the data that we're collecting, all of the meetings, all of the surveys, all of that would be accessible to the public. We're going to talk about that next. Yes.
I think summertime.
That's very nice that you say that, and I appreciate what the city is doing. But where was the transparency 6 months ago when they just rolled it out? Oh, we're going to do this. No input for anybody because of the public outcry. That's what we're doing now. So, you let the horse out of the barn the first time, and you didn't close, and you tried to close the door on us, but you didn't get away with it. Thank you.
Well, and just to put a final point on it, I don't know if you gentlemen came in after I said this. I am not here to rubber stamp a marina. I told them from the get-go, don't hire me. What you want is a marina. I'm not the dude. I do other things. I do what you just saw. It's public space activation. What they choose to do with it, I think you all organize. You're a very organized group of people. You can influence that. The boat show conversation that's a hairy problem to crack because you have a lease, right? But if our recommendation is to enter negotiations to do something because you really can't really do anything without addressing the lease, that is a real thing. Putting a marina on the waterfront is not top of mind for me at all.
Right. And that is why we brought Tony on board, so that we can have somebody provide an impartial review based on all the data that we're gathering to allow us to make those recommendations. We didn't want, it's not just the city, we're not the experts on activating public spaces. That's why we brought the experts to do that, those who do placemaking, the data, the community engagement. That is why we're here, to have a process that the residents can stand by. Thank you. One final comment, and then we will wrap it up, but we'll be around to take any other questions that you may have.
When is the lease up?
Oh, I had that in the notes, like 2030 or something. It's like a bunch of years, and it keeps on getting renewed.
All right, well, are we done?
That's it.
All right, thank you all for
Okay,
your
bye,
time.
guys.